What I wanted to do today was try and offer you some of my reflections as somebody who has been poacher turned gamekeeper and maybe is now back to being a poacher as a politician. I have worked within the voluntary and community sector, I've worked within participative sectors, I have a PhD in the psychology of participation, I've also been a local councillor and now I'm an MP. I'm passionate about how you get people to be involved. It's part of my politics, it's part of my operating philosophy because I know that's how you change things. And I got involved in politics not because I wanted to change governments, but because I wanted to change lives. In that sense then, I'm acutely aware that there are many off and online ways of involving and participating people in what you do, some of which are more successful than others, but the key to that is for me about purpose, it's not about process. So my first slide for you here is some of my reflections on good and bad ways to engage online with the political process. The picture of beef casserole is from my absolute favourite all-time story, many of you will know, and stop me properly hippie style with the shaking hands, you heard these ones before, about the government's consultation about what their priorities should be, where they had lots and lots of people writing in saying all sorts of things, including a fantastic recipe for beef casserole was given to them. Up in the corner there is a genuine email that I received as a local MP demanding that I take on Apple and their proprietary printers, that would be an effective use of my time. And then in the very far corner there is one you might have seen this week. I have been campaigning on an issue called legal loan sharking for some time now, and we discovered that one of the companies who is essentially a legal loan shark had been Twitter trolling me and had been using Twitter to engage not just with me, but with those people who are trying to follow and support the campaign, trying to challenge me, calling me mentally unstable, nuts, a self-serving ego. It wasn't my mother. It turned out actually to be an employee of one of the companies. What you might like in terms of poetic justice is I've now got them leafleting in my community tomorrow for an anti-legal loan shark event I'm running on Saturday. So that is restorative justice in its action. My point about all of this is that there are millions of people now using these technologies. There are a plethora of ways in which people are comfortable with engaging with the public sector, with democracy online. We know that 1 billion tweets is sent every 5 days. I now have 21,000 followers just as one MP in the UK. A lot of them are local people, a lot of them are certainly British citizens. People are very comfortable with the idea of engaging and using these kind of tools, both with Facebook as well. But one of my questions is about process, because if we just use the technology as it is, the question for me is it suiting the purpose that we want it to serve? Just as obviously a lot of people have been talking about the use of data within government, I welcome the idea that you can actually open up data sources within government. I think it could be potentially incredibly useful. I like to think that this is a picture of the Prime Minister obviously using his new iPad app to look at data across government, not just playing Fruit Ninja. I have to say I've stopped playing the countdown game in the chamber because I'm absolutely convinced I'm going to get caught doing it. But the question for me is about, if we know that we can get that data there, are we driven by the fact that the data exists, or are we driven by the purpose of what we want to use the data for? I think in answer to Nick's earlier question, certainly there are savings to be made. We know that the costs of getting transactions online are 20 times lower than it would be if you were to deal with a citizen over the phone, and 30 times lower if you were to deal with a citizen in face-to-face purpose. My worry about all of these debates, though, is they tend to be very transactional, and they don't, to me, get at the heart and the root and the premise of what participation could offer British society, which is not just about a customer complaints desk or a better way of analysing data. For me, it's something more fundamental, which is about participation and engagement and the transformational capacity that that offers our society. In that sense, then, this is where I make myself deeply unpopular with lots of people in the audience. A, because I'm very sceptical about the idea that online technologies are somehow a magic bullet to some of those deeper problems that we have, and B, because I've got big beefs with some of those technology organisations, and I can say that because one of my constituents is here from change.org, so at least I'm being brave. I am also one of those people who was the target of a petition, and as somebody who wants to participate and engage with people in my local community and was organising offline meetings about the activity, the fact that the presumption was that it would be a one-way conversation, that it would be broadcast the other way, seemed to me to be exacerbating rather than addressing one of the challenges that we have to face here, which is if we want people to engage, then actually we don't want to replicate that broadcast process that comes from government the other way round. Actually, what we want to do is rebuild that relationship and use technology to be able to do that. And in that sense, a number of the organisations that to me have been very welcome in offering people the idea that they should interact with their politicians have done so from the premise that their politicians probably don't want to interact with them. one of the things that I've enjoyed doing is taking everybody who has contacted me through 38 Degrees, whether it's been about badgers or forests or the NHS, and ask them to contact 38 Degrees and join the campaign around legal loan sharking and saying, actually, let's have a conversation about the kind of society we want to create. 38 Degrees rang me. They were quite surprised that all these people were suddenly starting posting on their site. My favourite example down there is obviously the Coney 2012 campaign, which I think is a great example of sort of busting the myth that online automatically leads to offline participation. We know it's more likely, but we know it's not necessarily automatic. We know in Australia, something like 25,000 people signed up to attend an offline meeting about the Coney 2012 campaign. Only 19 showed up to the actual meeting. So it doesn't always translate, and it also doesn't address what to me is the crippling problem we have in Britain, which is that people want to be involved. People do care about their local communities. 51% of people believe when they get involved, it could make a difference. Only 1 in 10 of us actually do. I don't see that as a problem for the people who don't get involved. I see that as a lost potential for the difference that those people could make, and I see the challenge that we have to do in terms of getting people involved. And actually, I see that not just as about the democratic process and changing this customer complaints kind of culture, but something more fundamental. Forgive me for going a bit geeky, but this is my obsession in politics. It's what I call the sweet spot, is finding the point where when things come together, you get the maximum impact from the different resources and the range of issues that you want to bring together. Those of you who are sports fans will know more than I do the differences between the dead spot and the sweet spot. But my point is it's about where resources can be interacting and the fact that they do interact with each other. So it's not any one source of power. And when I talk about power, I don't just mean the state, I mean citizens, and I mean the contribution that everybody can make to achieving the outcomes that you want to achieve. A great example for me, given some of the challenges we're facing on this, is diabetes. We currently spend 10% of the entire NHS budget dealing with our failure to tackle diabetes as a society. So not just dealing with diabetes itself, but actually our failure to deal with it. What do I mean by failure? I mean people having to have amputations or renal failure. So essentially waiting until people get so ill they have to have their feet cut off. Now, I didn't go into politics to wait until people got sick. In my community, which has a high incidence of diabetes, I absolutely take the challenge that we have to change the way in which my local healthcare services work to tackle those problems before they start, to help those people who we can help prevent their diabetes from progressing to that stage. In sweet spot politics, that means finding the point of intervention that is the most likely to help them make the lifestyle choices and get the healthcare support that they need to be able to avoid hospital admissions, to be able to lead a quality of life at a much later level. For me, technology offers options to be able to do that, but in of itself is not the only answer. But when you start thinking about that sweet spot, when you start thinking about not one source of power and how is it working with others, but how they interact, how they mesh together, you can start thinking about how technology helps it more likely that we can get those conversations right. And what I want to do now is give you some examples of where I think that has happened online and what I think that offers us in the UK. I'm absolutely passionate about the fact that we need Price Runner for the public sector. Some of you might have seen a report that came out this week that said that the NHS is losing £500 million a year because of disparities in procurement budgets. So in basic terms, one hospital trust was paying £120 for a box of blankets, another was £47 for a box of blankets. Data can help us mesh together what people are paying, can help us find that sweet spot in procurement that could save us all money that could go into improving our public healthcare and our services. Korea is way ahead of the UK in these factors. Korea has an annual investment in this system to keep the data up to date, but it saves about £6 billion a year as a result by doing this, by sharing information, by using technology to bring people together and start to ask the questions that frankly we ask in our private life when we look at data, but we're not yet asking within our public life. But actually, one of the things I think is really important about data, one of the really important things about participation is to not see it just about money or to not see it just about accountability, to actually look at what you can generate in terms of activism and outcomes in people. I'm really excited by the work they're doing in America with the mind mixer technology. Again, some of you may have seen this stuff, some of you have seen how people are using it. There's now 200 different sites where they're using this technology to bring people together to share their insights about their local community and then ask what can be done about it. In fact, they're gamifying the system. So they're actually addressing points to people and giving people the option to gain points by who else they can involve in the process of change and who else they can get to support their campaign and work with them on it. It's delivering really exciting results in San Francisco and a number of other places as well. But also, I'm a big fan of things like Patients Like Me, about thinking about that insight and support that people can offer each other and how technology can help us do that. Again, when you're talking about our future healthcare challenges, many of them are about lifestyle diseases. That isn't going to be about a doctor just telling you to lead a certain lifestyle. It's also going to be about how other people can support you to lead a better type of lifestyle for your health. Patients Like Me now covers over 1,200 health conditions and has 100,000 users, all supporting each other in making good choices about their healthcare, all therefore supporting each other to then participate in conversations with their doctors as well. This, to me, seems a fundamental question about how, when resources follow the wisdom of the crowd, we hit that sweet spot where we find the point where actually everybody can contribute and benefits can accrue to each other. Again, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Kickstarter. Kickstarter seems to me a great example of where actually it's brought together people's insights and their contributions towards achieving particular projects. We now know there's 22,000 projects that have been funded in this way, projects that perhaps in a traditional setting where you wouldn't have had that interaction between people's wants and their needs, getting that same level of attention. The Solar Schools project seems to me to take that to a much more localised level, but offer the same insight about where actually you can have on and offline benefits. So the schools are helping their students learn about sustainable development, but they're also fundraising for solar panels, which will help the school's costs in the same time, and they're reaching out to people to be able to do that. They are then bringing their own insights about why it matters to their school to be part of that process to get the results and to appeal for help. They've now had 10 schools get involved that raised £70,000, and a further 21 schools have got involved and will hopefully be equally as successful. Probably the thing that most people are familiar with in terms of this point where you bring resources with people and insight together is participatory budgeting, which I know has had a positive and a negative experience. I've sat through some incredibly boring meetings, frankly, in the UK on it, but in other countries they are better at doing this. Partly, and this is one of the final points I want to make, is because they have the real commitment behind it. So New York has just started getting involved. They've got 250 people now regularly turning up to the meetings and a further 1,000 people taking part online as well. But crucially, as you'll see at the bottom, 19 elected officials have actually got involved. So they've actually brought their contribution to the process and taken back the lessons that they have learned from working with their citizens in that way. Participatory budgeting, any participatory process, whether on or offline, takes time to bed in. It takes time for people to trust. And therefore, although it might not sound like very many, 250 in a city like New York, I have every confidence if they carry on working in the way in which they are, it will grow and bring in not just the money for the projects that they're working on themselves, but their insight, their engagement, and the work they're doing offline as well. If I tell you that in Argentina, in Rosario, where it's been running a lot longer, 66,000 people took part in voting in the process, you can see where it can get to in terms of participation. The final thing I think we need to start thinking about when we're looking at technology and participation on and offline is about accountability. It wouldn't be an event if I wasn't going to big up Walthamstow, because obviously that's where I represent. This is some work we've been doing in Walthamstow. Currently in Walthamstow, we have no sexual health care at all. We have doctors who refuse to prescribe basic contraceptive to local women. Yeah, it's happening in East London. Women in East London and we've worked together to hold our local healthcare providers to account. And what we've done is we've used a range of forums, both on and offline, to bring women together who were angry about this but felt they couldn't complain, and to start holding our local healthcare people to account. In that process, we have conducted surveys, gathered evidence about the impact of these changes, about what services are out there. We've also forced our local healthcare providers not just to talk with me, but to talk with the women that they were serving. Most crucially, those women themselves have then got other women involved in healthcare services in the local community. So we have asked them to take responsibility for the outcome of the service that they are providing and to engage with a community that wasn't previously engaged in public healthcare delivery. We now have a meeting on the 7th of December, which Diane Abbott is coming to, and frankly, I feel a little bit scared for my local doctors and my new CCG group if they don't agree with what these women want to do. But what they're coming forward is a solution rooted in the community, rooted in the evidence and the insight that they've got about what would be better in terms of tackling one of the highest levels of abortions, repeat abortions and STIs that we have in the country, which happens to be in Walthamstow. In that sense, I'm hugely excited by the number of hyperlocal sites there are in the UK, because what we've done, that Wowstow site, is a hyperlocal site. There's 400 of them now, according to Ofcom, and it's very clear that people do want to use online technologies to engage offline. They do want to have the wisdom of the crowd brought into public services. The question for all of us in politics is, are we really serious about engaging with it? And can we have a relationship with it so that we don't repeat the mistakes of that customer complaints process, but we actually truly collaborate? My experience as a local councillor, now as an MP, is that when we do that, we're absolutely unstoppable, and it gives me great hope for the kind of future that my local community can have, and indeed my country can have. But it requires not just the technology and the tools, it requires that commitment and the purpose. That, to me, is the greater challenge that we've got to face. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Stella.